of June 3rd, 1963, Clarence Earl Gideon was seen inside the Bay Harbor pool room in Panama City, Florida, sitting at the bar and counting coins. Henry Cook, a young man who was perceived to be using the payphone outside the pool room, sees Clarence Earl Gideon inside and sees this as an opportunity for an alibi. A cop approaches Mr. Cook and asks what he is doing. Cook informs the cop that he was calling for a taxi but noticed that the pool room window was broken and saw Clarence Earl Gideon inside. The officer enters the pool room and notices that the jukebox had been broken into and broken beer bottles all over the bar. The officer asks Clarence Earl Gideon to empty his pockets and finds that Clarence has over $5 in coins. The officer arrests Gideon on the charges of breaking and entering with intent to commit petty larceny. At Mr. Gideon's first trial, he is not appointed an attorney, loses the case, and is sentenced to 5 years in a state penitentiary. In prison, Clarence writes a letter to the Supreme Court and asks for a retrial on the basis of being denied counsel to represent him. The Supreme Court approves his request and appoints an attorney to represent Mr. Gideon in a court of law. The lawyer successfully argues the case and Mr. Gideon is set free and cleared of all charges. The following narration shows these events from the viewpoint of Clarence Earl Gideon. Another long night at the Bay Harbor pool room. Guess I better lock up for the night. All the money seems to be in the jukebox, better lock that up. Now to turn the lights off and I'm out of here. I just know I'm forgetting something. Oh well, I'll check it in the morning. Whoa, hold up right there, sir. I need to ask you a couple of questions. Well, what seems to be the matter, officer? I heard the possibility of a break-in around here. Do you mind emptying your pockets for me, sir? Well, officer, I just try to help out Mr. Smith every so often by emptying the jukebox and clearing out the coin machine. Can you just empty your pockets for me, sir? After it was found that Mr. Gideon had $5 in coins in his pocket, the officer formally placed Mr. Gideon under arrest on the charges of breaking and entering with intent to commit petty larceny. How did I get myself into this situation? Everyone knows that I'm simply trying to help out old Mr. Smith. In the case of Mr. Clarence Earl Gideon, on the charges of breaking and entering with intent to commit petty larceny, is the defendant ready for trial? Well, no, sir. And why is that, Mr. Gideon? Didn't you know your trial was set for today? And if so, why haven't you prepared for today? Well, sir, I do not have a lawyer. I can't afford one. The defendant knew that his trial was set for today, and therefore should have made prior arrangements to obtain counsel. We shall proceed with the case. Will the prosecution give their opening statement? On the night of June 3rd, 1961, Clarence Earl Gideon was seen inside the Bay Harbor pool room by Mr. Lester Wade. After Mr. Wade tipped off an officer that there may be a break-in at the pool room, the officer on duty decided to take a look inside. After going inside, it was seen that the back window of the bar was busted into, the jukebox door open, and Mr. Clarence Earl Gideon inside. When asked to empty his pockets, it was found that Mr. Gideon had $5 in coins and could not manage to say why. I think the jury will find that the evidence is pretty straightforward on who committed this break-in. If that is all, the defense may present their statement to the jury. I didn't do it, and the evidence will prove that. The jury may now step out and talk over the statements and evidence. If the jury has made their decision, please hand the verdict to the bailiff. Mr. Gideon, the court finds you guilty on all charges and sentences you to 5 years in a state penitentiary. Hey there, what you in for? I was accused of breaking and entering into a pool room and stealing money from the jukebox and cash register. I didn't do it though. The court didn't take my argument into account during my trial. I guess the judicial system only caters to those who can afford a lawyer. Something has got to turn around with our judicial system. I know I'm entitled to rights as a citizen of the United States. It's going to be a long shot, but I'm going to write to the Supreme Court arguing against my case on the basis of violation of my right to a fair trial. I couldn't get a fair trial on my own. Heck, I don't know anything about arguing a case. Maybe someone will be decent enough to take my financial situation into account. I'm going to check to see what books they have in the library. I need to do a little more research on this. Clarence, you got a letter back from the Supreme Court. They have agreed to hear my case, and I'm getting a retrial. Maybe my luck is finally turning around. In the case of Clarence Earl Gideon and the charges of breaking and entering with intent to commit petty larceny, will the defense state their argument? On the night of June 3rd, 1963, Clarence Earl Gideon was seen inside the Bay Harbor pool room with the light turned out and looking very suspicious. A window in the back of the pool room was found to be busted out. When the officer entered the pool room to confront Mr. Gideon, he found the jukebox had been opened as well. When the officer asked Mr. Gideon to empty his pockets, it was found that Mr. Gideon had $5 in coins. I think it's pretty obvious, as stated in his first trial, that all the evidence points to him. Will the defense please state their argument? Why, yes, sir, we'd be happy to. You see, Mr. Gideon often helps out at the Bay Harbor pool room, closing up the place a few times a week. He checks the jukebox to make sure it's locked up. However, he is accused by Mr. Lester Wade, who was standing outside the pool room at 5 in the morning after having just returned from a party. Why was he standing out there all by himself? I'll tell you why. Mr. Wade was still a little thirsty, looking into the pool room and seeing all that beer and wine behind the counter. He sees Mr. Gideon inside and sees this as his chance to bust into the pool room, steal some drinks, and blame Mr. Gideon for this. I think the jury may very well see it our way that the evidence does in fact play against Mr. Wade, not Mr. Gideon. That is all. The jury may dismiss to discuss the case and decide a verdict. Will the jury please hand the verdict to the bailiff? Mr. Gideon, this court finds you innocent on all charges. Court dismissed.